excited to about stress and anxiety from an East Asian perspective. And before we jump into all the Q&A that people already sent in, I thought I'd just give a quick explanation of what is happening to our bodies when we are under stress. So when we feel stress or anxiety, this triggers in our bodies our sympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system stimulates our body's fight or flight response. So when activated, we have a physiological response that's happening in our bodies. Our adrenaline and cortisol spike. This causes an increase in blood pressure. It causes our heart rates to rise. It basically switches us into survival mode. And evolutionarily, this was very important. We've all probably heard hundreds of millions of years ago of our ancestors out foraging and then encountered a predator, and they stepped into this fight or flight mode, and that is what saved them, that response. They could choose to fight or they could flee. The problem is that now our bodies and our minds, we can't really tell the difference between when we have a mortal threat versus just an everyday stressor. And so when we feel stressed now, we have the same physical reaction. So our adrenal glands increase, or they activate, they increase cortisol, which is the stress hormone. And then we feel symptoms of stress. So rapid heartbeat, maybe sweaty palms, a nervous feeling in our stomach. And now more than ever, we're kind of operating out of this space more and more regularly. This is where it becomes problematic because over time, chronic stress can lead to all sorts of imbalances in the body, from migraines, digestive issues, skin disorders, insomnia, mental health issues, and even more severe like heart disease, diabetes, and so on. So if I could take the stressors away for all of us, I would do that, absolutely, but I cannot, sadly. But instead, what I'm hoping to do is just share some ways in which we can regulate our nervous systems by moving out of this sympathetic fight or flight and moving into our parasympathetic nervous system. That's our rest and digest. And this is the space that we're operating from when we feel calm and relaxed and chill. And we shift from one to the other by signals that we send to our bodies. We're sending ourselves messages all the time. And so throughout this conversation, I hope to kind of pepper in some ways in which we can all learn how to regulate our own nervous systems.
Thank you. That's, yeah. I was wondering if we could start with looking at the ways that acupuncture influences stress hormones in the body. And for someone who's coming in for stress management or anxiety, how long would it possibly take for them in terms of treatment length to get to the bottom of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So how it influences stress hormones. Well, when we insert acupuncture needles, we have connective tissue that winds around these tiny little needles, and that increases the electrical conductivity in our body. So when that happens, it's triggering our nervous system to release endorphins, which is like our body's feel-good chemicals. And so in that instant, you can have this flood of endorphins creates a sense of calm and relaxation, and even can decrease pain, that sort of thing. Acupuncture also acts on the brain to reduce cortisol levels. So that is the stress hormone that I mentioned earlier. And it also elevates serotonin levels, which is a chemical messenger that's responsible for modulating our mood. It helps improve sleep and digestive function. And so in doing all of this, we are allowing ourselves to connect with that parasympathetic nervous system. That's the space that we're operating from when we need to heal and where our bodies are restoring or replenishing. So with acupuncture, it's really prompting our body's innate intelligence to restore balance and return to equilibrium and homeostasis. That's the space where we want to be operating from for like peak functionality. Most people feel immediately relaxed after an acupuncture treatment because it really kind of helps to flip a switch from sympathetic to parasympathetic. It's very palpable. You can feel the difference between like before the needles go in and then when someone rests with the needles for half an hour and then comes back, like the energy is at a much different level. I will say though that the effects of acupuncture are cumulative. And so we do encourage regular weekly treatments in order to really retrain our brains to be less reactive, and to achieve more lasting results. So I would say generally like 8 to 12 weeks of regular treatment. And then from there, most people can kind of switch to once a month or once a season as kind of like an emotional tune-up, or emotional like regulation. Dear me, Dr. Pulisfer, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, well, first of all, and thank you, Emma, and thank you, Anna Kreitzer, for inviting me here today. I was really eager to come join in because Anna has such incredible things to say about how East Asian medicine can benefit persons that are coping with stress and anxiety and how it might disrupt their life, and how acupuncture can be a tremendous remedy, like a vessel of serenity that they can remain safely ensconced in. So Anna has so many interesting tips and guidelines for people to follow that I really wanted to be here to hear about it. And it's something that, you know, we all specialize in reproductive medicine, but if you were to say, Jeremy, what are you really interested in treating outside of helping people with reproductive health? I would say the mood disorders and specifically depression and anxiety. And I really mean this, and I know Anna will underscore what I'm saying. Even if we did not focus directly on helping people who were dealing with, say, panic disorder or an anxiety condition, or just day-to-day concern about the way the world has been weaving down the road as of late, the mechanism of acupuncture is, as Anna stated, completely wrapped up in bringing the body into parasympathetic tone, into rest and digest. So even if we were to do an experiment where we're actively like, I'm not going to focus on treating the anxiety, quite naturally, just by having that cumulative effect, as Anna stated, of coming in for regular weekly treatments for a season, right? For anywhere from, like, I would say comfortably 8 to 10 to 12 visits, just to echo Anna's earlier statement, you will very assuredly move into that tone of peace and relaxation. And it's been really interesting for me as a clinician and for all of our colleagues that when I have a lot of patients come in working in fertility, working in conception, working in sustaining and stabilizing gestation, the one thing I notice, in addition to really helping people with their gastrointestinal system, is that if anxiety is a co-complaint, week after week, the one thing that people say repeatedly is, I cannot believe how much calmer I feel in my day-to-day activities. For example, I have a terrible fear of being in elevators, and a patient remarked to me, the whole week after I came in, I was cool as a cucumber every time I rode an elevator. And I'm not talking like 7 treatments in, I mean after the first or second visit. So acupuncture operates by taking the center of the brain that works with fight or flight, but also has the capacity to bring us into this beautiful Shangri-La of rest and digest. In addition to serotonin perfuming our body with these endogenous opioids that many people know as endorphins, beta endorphins and enkephalins. And one thing that I wanted to mention that Anna and I were talking about earlier today is that we think of those opioids as painkillers, right? That the internally generated morphine that the body makes around the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland is for pain relief. But the truth is that that signal that the brain releases by perfuming your bloodstream with endorphins is the signal of the overarching regulation of the body to heal in general. So not only are they feel-good compounds, but your brain will say, wow, I've really been distracted with all of this survival programming. Now all these other conditions that need to be refurbished and rehabilitated can be addressed, and the body is quite willing to do so. So think about all the applications, how broad that is when we say we're able to bring people into harmony and balance. That's the main message that I wanted to pass along today. And Anna, thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much.
I feel like I could just listen to both of you talk forever. You guys are great. So we received a lot of questions about COVID and anxiety and stress. And I wanted to touch on that. And I wanted to see what your thoughts were on how COVID has impacted stress levels, and if there are steps that people who are dealing with that, I mean, we're all dealing with stress from COVID. So what are some steps that we can take?
Yeah, I thought this is a great question. And the more I was thinking about it, the more things were popping into my head of just things we don't even think about, how ways in which COVID has affected us. So I have a lot to say on this. So to start, I think that just talking about the sympathetic nervous system, we've all been in this heightened state of stress for a few years now. And it's bringing out a lot of fear in all of us, I think. And the problem is that we haven't really had relief from it, because it's just been very compounded. And there's fear of first getting the virus, then we're worried about our families getting sick or passing it on to somebody else. And so then the minute we think that maybe we're turning a corner, there's a new variant. And so this sort of fear is really taxing on our nervous system in general. From a Chinese medicine perspective, all the different organ systems have an emotional component connected to it that we can't separate from the organ. It's just a part of the way it operates. And fear is the emotion that's connected to the kidney system in Chinese medicine, which is really interesting, right? Because the adrenal glands sit on top of the kidneys, and that's what releases our stress hormones. And so an increase in this fear is going to continue to increase our stress hormones and continue to keep us in this state of fight or flight. And then we continually are afraid, and it's like this perpetual thing. And when I'm talking about, fear taxing the kidneys, I'm just talking about like an energetic. So please, no one needs to worry that there's anything wrong with your kidneys if you are, constantly kind of living in this low level of fear that I think we all are. But that is one thing that I've been seeing a lot of. I've also been noticing a lot of us holding our breath both physically and also metaphorically. Like first of all, we're all wearing masks all the time. So a lot of us are not breathing as deeply as we normally do, or our breathing becomes a little bit shallower. We're also not drinking as much water when we have our masks on, most of us, because we are at work or we're in public. And so we are not hydrating as much, which is a problem for regulating our bodies. And then we are sort of metaphorically holding our breath too. We are always waiting for like, what's the next thing that's going to happen? We're scrutinizing every plan that we make in a way that we've never had to do before. And not to mention the fact that COVID is a virus that affects the respiratory tract. So there's a lot having to do with the lungs here. Interestingly, in Chinese medicine, the lung is connected to the emotion of grief. And there's also no shortage of that these days. I think we are individually and collectively grieving so much. And so that's why I think that deep diaphragmatic breathing is something that is so important for all of us to kind of focus on and tap into as a way to stimulate or regulate our nervous systems and tap into the parasympathetic. Because when we do that, when we take big breaths deep into our lower abdomen, we are sending a message to our brain that we are safe and we can calm down. Another thing, I told you I have a lot of thoughts on this. Another thing is that for a lot of us now, we are staying home, so we're not moving as much as we used to be. This kind of lack of movement causes stagnation in Chinese medicine. Stagnation can lead to pain. It can lead to fatigue, depression, weight gain, all sorts of things. And then we might be overeating because we're bored, or we might be not eating enough because we're constantly in Zoom meetings back to back. And so our digestive system has become a little bit dysregulated. That's something that I'm seeing a lot of. So there are all sorts of ways in which little subtleties, some of them subtle, some of them not so much, are kind of causing us to dysregulate a little bit. So some of us may not even feel stressed regularly, but we're on the computer all the time and that taxes our eyes. And so then our eyes become dry and blurry. So I think just bringing awareness to the changes and then trying to make subtle changes to shift. So if you can, taking a walk around the block in between meetings and just moving a little bit, or even taking a minute to stretch, connecting to your breath. These are all ways that I think we can kind of help to live in this new reality that, you know, we have been in and we continue to be in. Dr. Pulisfer, do you have anything to add?
Oh, you're on mute.
You're muted.
I was so hypnotized by Anna's speech, and I was breathing into my diaphragm and hydrating. I forgot that I was muted. Anna and I, again, we had an earlier conversation where we were talking about the stress from the pandemic. And Anna has so much helpful information about how to develop the breath. And so as Anna, you were speaking, I was thinking about an acupressure exercise and a breathing exercise that people can do when you're moving through the day, and it seems like all of these sort of almost like global level worries are encroaching. We have a point that is approximately 2 to 3 finger breaths up the arm on the palmar side of the forearm between these 2 tendons, and we call that pericardium 6. And the beautiful thing about pressing pericardium 6, it's right here in the center of the palmar face of my forearm, is that that channel, there's a channel that runs from that point directly to the sanctity of your heart. And so when this point is stimulated with an acupuncture needle or with deep pressure, if your heart rate is going too quickly, it slows it down to a regular rhythm. And even if your heart rate was too slow, it will bring it up to a proper rhythm as well. And one of the beautiful things is that people these days, like, we feel so hypersensitive. It's like, oh, everything out here is so crazy. How can you expect me to be at peace? Well, if everything is out here is crazy, come back into your heart. Then come out of here, turn off all of the distractions and the doom scrolling, and come from there and come into the tender sanctuary of your heart. And so pericardium 6 energetically, metaphorically, pulls you out of this receiving array of the machinations of your brain, of that labyrinthine, unending rumination. And it kind of pulls you down into the magnetism of just existence, of your spirit in a serene place. So you push on pericardium 6. And we can do a breathing exercise where we breathe in and you touch your tongue to your soft palate in the front of the top of your mouth as you breathe in to a count of 4. And then exhale to a count of 8, making a V sound, like a V or an F if you prefer. Breathe in to 4. Exhale. Something about that bilabial movement of the F or the F. I mean, I've done versions of this before, and now I'm like, it completely brings you down. And that's absolutely indispensable, right? It's when day to day, there's such a tendency to go there. Anna and I just wanted to make certain that we gave you something that people could use right away. And, you know, that breathing, you'll hear that story from many different people, from therapists, from people that do MDR, but this, right, with the acupressure point, is an added benefit. I tell parents of children who are having trouble sleeping, you can even press this on little ones, right, to help them calm down when they're reluctant to go to sleep, right? So mommy or father or parent can do this, and also you can do it for yourself and you can do it for your child. It's very comforting, right? You're pulling yourself into the very seat of your soul.
That's such a nice point to have in your back pocket. I feel like as being part of this event, I know I have a back seat even as moderator, but I still get nervous. And even just doing that just now, I immediately felt just a wave of calm. And it's just, and it was so interesting when you said that pressing on this point, whether your heart is beating a little too fast or too slow, it'll help it kind of regulate and modulate. And at first I was like, how does it know to do that? And I was like, oh, like Anna was saying, it prompts your body's intelligence to do what it needs to do in that moment. So it's super interesting. Thank you for sharing that point with us.
Absolutely.
I agree with you, Emma. I have to say, I'm not exempt from my sympathetic nervous system going on overdrive, and I can feel myself like a little bit calmer after doing some acupressure there. And also, it reminded me of another point that I was going to share, which is a point on the heart channel that I love for acupressure. And it's if you make a fist and right where your pinky falls is heart 8. That's another point that I love to just right on the palm dig into when I'm feeling a little bit stressed or anxious to help bring things down. So
Mm,
The same on both hands.
yeah.
that's
Mhm,
great.
mhm.
Nice. Thank you.
You know, every time Anna you speak, you remind me of something else because you've told me so many interesting things, and I'm so lucky that I'm able to have that connectivity to you. And I remember again when we were discussing yin and yang, right? The opposites
Mhm.
in life, like the brilliant side, the sunny side of the hill, and the shadowy side of the hill, and dynamism versus magnetism. And everything has that yin and yang, that light and shadow. And another really helpful tip that's come to our awareness, when there's that heavy sense of foreboding, many people that are very sensitive, such as empaths, people that identify as highly sensitive people, oh, you can just feel it in the atmosphere. Convert that shadow into fuel for the light. That's another really good exercise. Remember when there's that substrate of like, you can just feel it. Yes. And then transmute it. Use that as energy to drive yourself to the next right action.
I love that.
Thank you. Great.
So we received a few questions about inflammation, and I know that a lot of our patients deal with inflammation, various manifestations, whether it's endometriosis or whatever it may be. For people who need to kind of limit inflammation or just in general, what would be some advice that you would give to people to help combat inflammation caused by stress?
So, well, first of all, stress slows things down in general. It causes stagnation. So again, movement becomes really essential, even if it's just gentle movement. Sometimes when things feel inflamed, it feels difficult to move, but really even gentle stretching can be helpful. And then when dealing with inflammation, dietary therapy can be really helpful. So eliminating inflammatory foods, processed foods and sugars are the biggest culprits, but also gluten, dairy, can also cause sensitivity to people who are inflamed. And then just eat a diet that's rich in lean proteins like fish and poultry, beans, antioxidant rich foods, really kind of focusing on diet and eating warm, nourishing cooked foods is important. And then, like Jeremy was saying and talking about yin and yang and balance, we're always looking for ways to bring the body into balance. And we always talk about Chinese medicine follows the laws of nature. And so inflammation is it's heat, it's fire, it's red and hot, it's inflamed. And so from our medicine, we say water puts out fire. So making sure that you're drinking enough water and that you're hydrating enough to give your body the resources it needs to keep things moving, to replenish tissue, is really important. And then just to share some anti-inflammatory foods, turmeric is really known for its natural anti-inflammatory properties. There is an enzyme in pineapple called bromelain, which is anti-inflammatory. And beets also contain a phytonutrient called betalains, which are known for anti-inflammatory properties. So really just kind of leaning into food as medicine, I think is important. And then of course. If you know that your inflammation is a stress response, we always talk about going at the root. So finding ways to manage the stress so that the recurrence of inflammation, it doesn't happen as frequently. So meditation, stretching, yoga, acupuncture and herbs is great for inflammation, but anything that brings you into a calm and grounded state. And I think we talk about meditation a lot, and I know that that can be scary for some people because people hear meditation and they think, I can't turn off my brain, that's too hard. And it is hard, and that's not necessarily what it's about. But I think that the important thing is for each person to honor whatever way it is that they can quiet their thoughts. It doesn't have to be meditating, but it could be just like putting on music and lighting a candle and taking a bath or bringing yourself down in whatever way that works for you, I think is important.
That's super helpful. It's interesting. We actually have a blog coming out soon from one of our practitioners about how to reapproach meditation for all those times where you've tried and it's felt too hard, which I am a candidate of. I was actually really excited when she wrote this because I was like, I'm gonna need to glean some advice from this. So maybe I'll try and publish it soon so I can send it with the recap email. Yeah. So many of our patients are going through fertility struggles, and stress is listed as one of the factors in infertility cases. So, how does stress impact fertility, and what are some tactics that people can use to handle or mitigate that?
Mm-hmm. So you've heard me say over and over again that stress activates our adrenal glands, and so it causes them to overproduce adrenaline and cortisol. In terms of fertility, when this happens, it interferes with the production of other key fertility hormones, follicular stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. So once that happens, then it has a cascading effect, and that influences testosterone and estrogen and progesterone. And all of these hormones are crucial in conception and implantation. So, if you're stressed every so often, it's probably not going to be problematic, but chronic stress can really build up, and it can stop ovulation, which is necessary to ovulate if you're trying to get pregnant. It can also create menstrual irregularities, which also makes it more difficult to conceive. And it can impact sperm quality as well. So yeah, I would say the hormonal balance is really the issue where stress comes into play with fertility. And in terms of mitigating it, I think everybody is different. You just need to find ways to manage or disperse stress in ways that work for you. Some things I know, there was a question about like being stressed at work and how that can play a role. Like if you can set a timer for yourself to throughout the day, just take 2 minutes to focus on your breathing, that could be great. If you could listen to a guided meditation or listen to music while you're working, some ways throughout the day that you can just kind of like bring yourself back. Jeremy's acupressure and breathing is a great suggestion. And he gave me a great suggestion a couple weeks ago when I was asking for some advice on how to, for me, stress and anxiety can often manifest as overthinking. And so I asked him for any suggestions on how to kind of turn that off. And he gave me one that I thought was great, which was when there's something that you're overthinking about, visualize yourself putting it in a box and then put that box on the shelf. And you can come back to it later whenever you need to. But if it's not helpful in that moment, and if it's, disrupting the other things that you need to do, just put it to the side, and like actually visualizing it was really helpful for me. So little tricks like that, I think it's not going to be like a big grand thing, but very little changes, I think, can actually make a really big difference and impact. And then Something else is just to kind of consider the habits that you have for handling stress, because when it comes to fertility specifically, if stress is causing you to, drink wine every night or drink coffee all throughout the day to get yourself through the day, there might need to, some of those behaviors could impact fertility. So it might be worthwhile at making small changes there, and finding ways that you can, self-soothe otherwise.
I love that idea. My anxiety also manifests into overthinking, and I love the idea of putting it in a box and just shelving it. It's similar to growing up. My mom used to tell me to put things in like a balloon and just blow them away. I think
I love that.
to get to just get it out is
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
yeah.
because also like with our thoughts, they need somewhere to go, right? So we either take action on them, or we decide not to take action, right? Like, okay, I don't want to do that. But then if you don't take action or decide not to take action, the thought just spirals if you don't do something with it. And so that is like where we end up ruminating, and it's not helpful at all. And so I think it becomes important to think about ways that we can disrupt the thought. So putting it in a mental box, writing lists is helpful for some people, or even just journaling and getting all of your thoughts out so there's nothing left. But yeah, disrupting the thought, I think, is important.
Yeah, I love that. What would your advice be for keeping the process of figuring out which supplements to take with other fertility issues as well? How do you help with that adding to the stress?
Yeah, I would say to not go at it alone for this one. There are so many experts in fertility medicine that can help with that because it can be very overwhelming. So I would consider scheduling an appointment with one of the practitioners at Yinova. You can come in to our clinic or schedule a virtual appointment, and we can help you figure out what supplements are best for you to take. Also, we can talk about custom herbal formula that could be helpful for fertility. But if you don't want to come into the clinic or don't want to make a virtual appointment, I would suggest to everyone Jill Blakeway's book, Making Babies. I don't know if everybody has read it, but if you are going through the fertility process, she co-wrote a book with reproductive endocrinologist, Dr. Sammy David, and it's got so many great resources in there for supplements and dietary therapy. It's a great resource for anybody who's confused and doesn't know where to start.
I think it's a good place to start too. Is it possible to diminish anxiety by repairing your vagus nerve?
The vagus nerve, yes. So for those who don't know, the vagus nerve is one of our cranial nerves that plays a key role in our parasympathetic nervous system, that rest and digest one that we've been talking about, where we want to operate from as much as possible. It influences our breathing, our digestive function, our heart rate. And so I do think that by kind of regulating the vagus nerve, you can definitely work on reducing anxiety. We can stimulate the vagus nerve by deep and slow breathing, something else I'm going to say over and over again. And as Dr. Pulisfer mentioned, singing or chanting, humming, those sorts of creating vibration, that actually can stimulate the vagus nerve because it's connected to our vocal cords. And so using sound, we can activate these muscles and activate this nerve. So again, meditation, massage, laughter, these are all ways that we can stimulate the vagus nerve. And also even taking a good probiotic has been shown that that can kind of work on our gut bacteria to improve brain function.
This is a bit of a random question, but what should someone look out for when looking for a good probiotic?
Oh, this is a great question. Dr. Pulisfer, would you care to field this one?
There are too many on the market. to speak with a very assiduous decisiveness or discernment. But like with all nutraceuticals, I think that the best approach is to go to someone who is experienced in working with the dispensation or recommendation of nutraceuticals or herbal remedies, because it's not simply which one is the best, which one has the most parts per million, or which one has the most ready bioavailability in terms of when we dose it, what the quality is, how it's incorporated, right? Advisements or admonishments about not taking them when you're taking antibiotics, because you're killing back everything that has to do with the flora and fauna of the endothelium, and that you might wait until you're done with a course of antibiotics in order to take them. And there are also some that are keyed in specifically, such as the ones that we feature at the Yinova centers that are keyed in specifically with a focus on digestive concerns, others working more toward the immune axis, right? Perhaps those that are more keyed into the gut, thymus, liver axis, and also ones that are great for hormonal rebalancing and, say, reproductive wellness. So there's such a wide array of what we could utilize that it's best to have someone who has an overarching view on your whole picture. What are the medications that you're taking in terms of pharmacologic prescriptions? What is the nutrition of this particular person? What foods have they selected and deselected? Are they taking any other supplements? And so a person who has a view of that broad picture can then make a specific inference, because this person's health goals are targeted on reproductive wellness, conception, digestive health, overcoming SIBO or small intestine bacterial overgrowth, to give examples. Then that choice, that selection of the many high quality brands that are available today can be given much better scrutiny from someone who has that objectivity and experience of seeing how different brands, different instrumentations have worked out for the individual. Like in all situations, we don't treat conditions, we treat persons, people, unique individuals who might fall into several archetypal categories, but everyone has their own unique needs and their unique alignment with what they're ingesting and taking in. Again, I think rather than it being, it's this one remedy for this, for everyone, it's probably something quite specific that needs to be a conversation. So this dovetails with what Anna said earlier. Oh, I can feel so stressed out and overwhelmed with all these supplements, say on my reproductive health journey. How do I eliminate the stress? We'll take that burden and hand it over to, again, someone who can serve as the fair witness and also a great objective assessor and help you integrate that into your overall picture.
Thank you. That was super helpful.
I think there's a million answers, and I think that it's in the hands of the physician who can be that co-creator or co-creatrix with the person in need of support.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pulisfer.
Yeah.
We had a question from someone who was worried about managing stress related to work, and when their partner, or I guess to broaden it out, their roommate or whoever it may be, when you're stressed with work and your day-to-day life, how can you support each other instead of multiplying the stress for each other?
This is also a great question, because I think that we are all carrying a lot of stress these days. And when you meet someone that's here, it's kind of natural to just go there too. So I think that one kind of the tactic of deciding, let's say if it's like work is over, and especially I think that for a lot of us, the lines have become a little bit blurred these days because some people are working from home more than they used to be. And so there's not really the same boundary that there used to be between work and home for a lot of people. So kind of creating that boundary, but then also making a conscious decision to like turn off the work if possible, or set it aside at least and put it away and just try to show up for each other. And for each relationship, partnership, friendship, that'll be different. But I think a lot of the time it's just offering your full attention to the person, and knowing that you can't take their stress away and it's not your job to take their stress away, but really just being there to listen, because sometimes the emotions, they need a place to go, and people just need to vent or express themselves. And I think it can be hard when we are sharing that space with someone to feel like we can't fix it, like we want to fix it, when really that's not actually what the person needs. They just need a space to be able to release that and let that go. So that's one thing I would say, is just like show up for each other and ask the other person what they need. And then the other is just to acknowledge that it's completely normal to need some time to yourself to reset, and to normalize asking for that. I think that we can't really show up for others until we take care of ourselves and tend to ourselves. And so making sure that if that's what you need, that you find ways to do that, so that you can show up better for your partner, your roommate, your friends. Yeah, I think so.
I wanted to add something there.
Please.
Again, as you and Emma were talking, and Anna, you were explaining all this, a couple things jumped into my mind. Especially, Anna, what you were saying at the very beginning. The last several years have been very unique, because even in the waxing and waning, the ascending and the declination of the pandemic as it goes through different phases, just because things are normalizing and going back into some sort of strange facsimile of what they might have been several years ago, many people are still working from home, right? Some companies have not reinstituted a physical occupation of their former real estate. And although many children have returned to school, there have been many times, especially with parenting, where parents had been used to being sort of exposed to their children nonstop. And in a similar way, people weren't used to always being with their partners. And so there becomes sort of a weariness that can develop in those relationships. And it really tests the bonds that used to have a natural separation. You got respite automatically because everyone was going to their assigned quarters. And so this will seem counterintuitive and contrarian to what I just said. But one thing I keep hearing, both socially and professionally, is people that are still in those places where they're closed in, they're starting to, or they're continuing to feel, God, I just feel like I'm so locked into these boxes and these compartments, and we can't put ourselves up on shelves like we do with circuitous thinking. And so one thing I've noticed when I've been talking to couples and partners, is that even if you can't necessarily get space from one another, this is going to seem so simplistic. Go outside and take a walk in nature or somewhere outdoors. And that visual spaciousness of being able to walk free and to no longer be confined might smooth out some of the rough edges and the acerbic tendencies that develop when people become overexposed to one another. It's so simple, right? It's almost like we wouldn't think to even do it, but it is so key to have spaciousness, to be aligned with nature, to earth, to pull electrons from the earth through the feet into the body, to breathe fresh air when we've been encumbered in our breathing for so long. This is absolutely key, and it's easy to forget, especially for indoor people. Even for people who like to retreat inward, who are very much like canids and like to be cave dwellers, it's still so wondrously refreshing to take that time with loved ones out of doors. It's easy to forget. We're all being kind of ensnared by interior environments.
It's so true. And I think it's, often the simplest things are the most profound, which I think what you said truly is. So thank you for sharing that. I had just a list of before. I know we're getting kind of close to wrapping up. So I just had some other ideas on ways people can try to mitigate stress and, tap into that parasympathetic nervous system. The first is really to connect with a support system. So, I honestly was anxious about giving this talk. And so I called a mentor and she gave me a quick 10-minute little pep talk. And it really just like set me back into the place that I needed to be in. So connecting with the people that know how to do that for you, I think is so important and helpful. And sometimes it's just like a little push that we need. So that's something. And then doing things that bring you joy. So watching a funny movie, spending time with friends if you can, or at least virtually. And then we talked a little bit about this before, but especially with high anxiety in Chinese medicine, this often connects to the heart. So finding ways to connect to the heart space, which can look different for different people, but a guided meditation to connect you to that space, drinking a cup of rose tea with intention, lighting some candles and taking a bath, whatever makes you feel like you are intentionally connecting to that space, I think is really helpful. And then with frustration, specifically with stress, when you're feeling frustrated, I think it's really important to have a place to let that out. So it's kind of like a pressure valve that needs a release steam when you're feeling stressed and frustrated and angry. So punch a pillow, like scream into a pillow, or throw a little temper tantrum in your bed if you have to, or like dance and move your body, but some sort of physical release for that energy is really important so that it doesn't stay in, but goes out. We talked about the deep diaphragmatic breathing. I'll just mention it one more time for good measure so nobody forgets, but that's always a good one. Something I've been seeing a lot in clinic is a lot of people have been carrying their stress and tension in their jaw. So facial gua sha and like facial massage has been really helpful for a lot of people during this time. Gua sha is a tool we use where it can be done on the back, on the neck, but on the face for jaw tension, where you're using like a stone tool and using upward scrapes to upward strokes on your skin to kind of help soothe the muscles and release muscular tension. So that's something that is really helpful if you feel like you are someone who clenches your jaw a lot. We sell gua sha tools at Yinova. There's also so many resources on the internet of videos that can show you how to do it. We can show you how to do it. But that's something worth looking into if you carry stress there. And then if you carry stress in your back, taking a tennis ball or a lacrosse ball or something hard and just putting it on the floor or up against the wall and kind of rolling on top of it, rolling out your muscles, really helps to alleviate spasms and soothe the muscles in that area. And then let's see. Epsom salt baths for a similar reason helps to relax and soften the muscles. And then wearing socks and slippers, I think, is really helpful. Keeping your feet warm for just grounding and bringing energy out of your head and down into your feet is another little trick I wanted to share with the group.
This is so helpful. I'll definitely add all of this to our recap email. And I'm so happy to hear that socks are helpful because I wear socks all the time, like more than I think.
Good job, Emma.
Winning.
Doing it right.
Also for gua sha, I also really love to do gua sha at home. And I heard that you can use, if you can't get your hands on a nice stone just yet for whatever reason, like salsa jar lids or things like that. It's like a soft edge. Just if anyone wants to try tonight and you only have a salsa jar.
Everyone's excited. Yeah, you can also use your fingers and massage your face, and that helps too. But wash your hands.
So I think Jeremy was going to lead us through a Qigong exercise, and I think we have enough time to do that before we wrap up. So if it's okay, Dr. Pulisfer, for us to pass over to you, that would be great.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you, Anna, for a wonderful evening. Anna, it's so exciting to hear all of these techniques and applications and all these new approaches we can use to feel stillness and comfort and safety in a world run riot. It really has been a great reminder for all of us. We all individually go through these challenges on a daily basis. And it's only by witnessing it within ourselves and our loved ones and our patients that we've been able to acquire this wisdom over the years. So thank you. It's been really delightful being here and listening to everything you've had to share. And so taking a cue from Anna about diaphragmatic breathing, we're going to do a beautiful Qigong guided visualization, inspired from many of our teachers and masters, but also from our dear founder, Dr. Jillian Blakeway. This all is inspired by these wonderful people who have led and educated us and brought this into our consciousness. So go ahead and feel your feet connecting with the floor, and wherever you're sitting, feel the lower portion of your spine committing itself to the chair, to the support, feeling yourself connecting with the space that you are occupying. And as you do so, let's turn our attention back to the diaphragm and become conscious of our breathing so that we feel this great ceiling canopy moving with our lungs, bringing our abdomen into the breath work to engage the diaphragmatic muscles. Taking a nice deep breath, deep inhalation and exhalation. And at the same time that we feel the ceiling canopy of our lungs and diaphragm, feel the basement. Feel the lower portion of the pelvic floor. Become aware that in this thoraxo-abdominal cavity, that there's a top and a bottom, and that allows you to connect with the entirety of your trunk. Makes you realize you have more space that you're working with and engaging more than just shallow breathing up at the top. It's just working the entire trunk in your breathing. As you continue to breathe deeply and slowly, feel the lower part of your spine extend down your legs like the roots of a great tree. And the roots of this tree are winding and wending their way all the way through your foot and into the earth, traveling and spiraling downward into the crust and mantle of the earth, winding further still all the way down to the center of Mother Earth, to foundation, to safety and support, to the wellspring of nourishment of Gaia, of Mother, of absolute yin, support. And as we yearn down toward the absolute yin, Mother Earth yearns upward toward us, rising up from the center of the earth through the mantle, back through the crust, into the kidney one, or the very soles of our feet, and up our legs again, traveling back upward through the roots of the strength of our legs and into our lower spine, where that nourishment rises up our spine to the center of our back and forward into our stomach, again giving us safety, constancy, and peace. Warming our bellies, reminding us that we are cared for, that we have a home, that we are grateful for the shelter that we are placed in today, and for the food that we have been fed, and that we are filled with the gratitude of the care that we have received. May that same care, nourishment, and support be given to our sisters, brothers, and all the folks we have in all of our communities. In this time of great transition on earth, may we all be reminded that we are one. And similarly, rising up the center of our back between our shoulder blades, a great silvery white light travels up our head, all the way to the very tippy top. And that great silvery white luminescence, like a cord, rises from our head and holds us in space as that white line of silvery luminescence pushes up through the ceiling of where we are into the evening sky and up through the atmosphere, all the way up through the cloud layer till we are rising between the sun and the moon, higher still to the dizzying heights over our solar system and out the outer spinward reaches of the Milky Way as we climb higher and higher above the supergalactic structures into the realms of cosmic light. And in that limitless light is absolute yang, pure consciousness and expansion, the will of heaven and the limitless. And as we aspire and yearn up toward that limitless light, it in turn yearns downward toward us, plunging back down through the outer spinward reaches of the Milky Way and teeming over our solar system, plunging down between the sun and moon until we re-enter Earth's atmosphere and back down through the lowest cloud layers over the eastern seaboard and down into the roofs of where we sit, into the tops of our heads and down our neck between our shoulder blades, back into the center and moving forward to join the yin. This is yin and yang forever locked in their tantric embrace. Dynamism and magnetism, light and shadow, substance and energy. This is the all, and all is well. And from that place in our center, the Tao, we draw the energy of the center up to a place between our eyes and our brow that we call the palace of impression. And from that space, we keep our eyes closed and just look up gently and feel the spaciousness of our consciousness and remind ourselves that at any moment in time, in the now, we can return to this place of solace and comfort, an unlimited resource throughout all the ages of life. And we give thanks for all that is. And at the sound of 3, we return to the screen. 1, 2, 3. Thank you all for being with us tonight. Thank you, Emma, for hosting us. This was lovely.
Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us, both of you. This has been really wonderful. I've learned a lot. Thank you. And that was beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Pulisfer. Thank you, Emma, for moderating and for everybody for being here.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.